shouldn't have buried me.
Oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me! A Nightmare on Elm Street 4: The Dream Master finds Freddy Krueger finally wiping out the last remaining Elm Street children, but just before he decides to hang up the claws and start his new career as a stand-up comedian, he finds a brand new slab of meat to carve through. Well, we're here, people. We've got through the first 3 Nightmare on Elm Street movies, and now we are finally over that hill and starting our downward slope in the franchise. And The Dream Master is an interesting movie. I've always had an interesting relationship with this one because when I was a kid and I was a Freddy fanatic, this is probably the one that I put in and watched the most, right alongside The Dream Warriors. But The Dream Master to me was always a fun movie. It was always really goofy. It was always kind of played for jokes. And unfortunately for the rest of the franchise, they took it farther and farther and farther with each one. And I'll say this about The Dream Master before I start diving into it. If you like the comedian, jokey Freddy, this is probably the best one. However, if you like your Freddy Krueger scary or menacing or taken seriously by the audience whatsoever,
If food don't kill you, the service will.
this is not the movie for you. So after the huge success of Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors, New Line wanted to crank out a sequel as soon as possible. They wanted to capitalize on all the Freddy fandom, all the Freddy hype going on, and they found a director in Renny Harlin. Now, at the time of this movie being made, or getting kind of its initial production push, Renny Harlin was basically homeless. He was going into New Line every single day wearing the same clothes, increasingly stinkier every single time he went in there because he didn't have anywhere to shower, didn't have anywhere to live, and they basically gave him this job partially to give some faith to a new director and to get a new spin on Freddy, but also to keep his ass out of the New Line offices. Which is an interesting story because it kind of splits down the middle in the message you get from it. On one side, you get this really uplifting message about never give up, never really give up on your dreams, never take no for an answer, just keep coming and keep coming. It doesn't matter if you were at your lowest lows like it seems Renny Harlin was in, there is somebody out there who will believe in you. And that's a great little story to walk away with. The other half of the story is that New Line had no idea what the fuck they were doing with this movie, didn't care enough about what they were doing with it, that they literally just handed it to the first homeless guy that walked in. And unfortunately that tone kind of goes throughout the whole entire production of this movie. The script was being written while the movie was being shot. The story never really got handled together. It became more about visuals and these individual scenes on these kills than tying any kind of a story throughout it or carrying forward the mythology or doing anything interesting with the villain. It just kind of became a cash grab, and for all those reasons, despite this movie still having quite a bit of entertainment value and nostalgia for me personally, it's one of the weirdest installments in this franchise. You know, Renny Harlin has this style to him where he likes these big extravagant scenes. He likes to go kind of balls to the wall. He likes to kind of go a little bit weird here and there and do things that are real extravagant. And it does give this installment its own flavor, its own little stamp, and it doesn't quite feel as bad as the other ones. It just feels something that went so far into the unique that it just kind of portrayed what Freddy and Nightmare was about a little bit. But I'll give him credit for trying to do something new and not trying to just follow what came before or try to do a Dream Warriors direct sequel. He does make it his own. To be honest, this is the only movie that's strictly comedic Freddy that I can sit down and actually enjoy. It is fun, it is enjoyable, it is off the wall and weird and goofy to where it's entertaining as hell when you watch it. I mean, I have huge problems with some of the things that they do, but if you just accept it for what it is and you put it in for entertainment value, it is one of the more entertaining movies in this franchise. So the movie kicks off and you got your 3 remaining Elm Street children left over from Dream Warriors. You've got Joey, Kincaid, my favorite, and you have Kristen. Now this time, Patricia Arquette would not come back for Kristen. There's lots of stories coming out there. The producers all say that she just didn't want to be a part of it and they weren't really sure why. All of her co-stars say that they didn't want to pay Patricia Arquette what she wanted and what she deserved to come back. Probably believe the co-stars a little bit more, knowing the production history and the reputation of the producers of this franchise. But nonetheless, we have a replacement in Tuesday Night. and I cannot stand her as a replacement for Patricia Arquette. Not only as an actress, not only in her personality, but she just does not embody that character at all. She doesn't do anything with it. She's such a stand-in and almost a glorified extra in her own movie that even when I was a kid, I was always watching part 3 and part 4, and it was always confusing to me if that was the same character. I knew Joey was back, I knew Kincaid was back, I knew she had the same name and the same mom, but I always was confused, is that supposed to be Kristen or is that somebody different? It's that weird and that jarring of a change from actress to actress. But Kristen, Joey, and Kincaid have moved on from their days in the mental hospital. They have a normal life, they have normal homes, they're going to high school with each other. They are all confident that Freddy Krueger is gone forever until Kristen starts having this paranoia. She starts having these freaky dreams again. She starts bringing them back into her dreams, and then suddenly we have what I will definitely say definitively is the worst resurrection scene in any horror slasher that I've ever seen. That's right, Freddy Krueger gets resurrected by a dog's piss. Yeah, that exists. So the dog takes a piss, Freddy's resurrected, he takes out Kincaid.
I'll see you in hell.
He takes out Joey. And then he takes out Kristen.
Now no one sleeps.
And unfortunately, when that should have been the end of his reign of terror, Kristen mistakenly brings in one character to try and help her before she dies, and Lisa Wilcox's character.
I'm a rat!
Why don't you reach out and touch someone? How sweet, fresh meat.
And now Freddy is open to kill so many more kids. Now let's talk about that story direction for just a second. This is kind of an Alien 3 situation. You have 3 kids who are brought over from what many will call the best of the franchise in Dream Warriors, and you have the 3 arguably best characters from that movie who are the survivors. Now losing 1, losing 2, yeah, that's a pill you can swallow, even though those characters are great. But killing them so fast in the beginning of this movie, and killing them kind of disrespectfully in some regards. I mean, Joey, that's the way he was always going to go out, let's be honest. That's how God intended it. It's like if I died in a huge headbanging accident, that's the way it was intended from the beginning. But Kincaid, that is not a fitting death for Kincaid. And even though I don't really like Tuesday Night's version of this character, I don't think it's a very fitting death for Kristen as a character either, because of everything that she battled through and overcame in that last movie. It just didn't feel like a fitting death that she gets taken out by her idiotic mother. But nonetheless, that's the story direction they chose. Now we're on to this new cast of kids, and to our first weakness of the Dream Master, because none of these kids are anywhere near as entertaining, well acted, or charismatic as any of the kids from Dream Warriors or even the first movie. Aside from Lisa Wilcox, who does do pretty well with what she's given, she's interesting enough, she does have a good little growth throughout this movie as her character. She's very shy, very reserved, and very awkward in the beginning, and she kind of slowly becomes this warrior. Everybody else, I could care less about. And not only do we have a new cast of characters in this movie, we have a completely different tone for a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, where the first one was straight up psychological horror, the second one was something else, the third one had a good horror slash comedy slash psychological mix. That one was kind of where everything was just, stars were aligned and everything had that perfect balance. This one is straight up weird horror comedy. And it's the way that this franchise goes even further from now on, and I'll always hold it against Dream Master for starting that little snowball effect, because had they have stayed the course with the direction and the tone they had in Dream Warriors, this franchise would have never gotten off the rails like it did. But because Dream Master went so off the wall weird that they just kept trying to top it and top it and top it, and we have what we got in the next couple installments, which we'll get into later. In Dream Master, the horror The gore and the seriousness just gets torn up and thrown out completely in favor of comedy, really strange one-liners.
How's this for a wet dream? No pain, no gain. Wanna suck the face?
No.
Which, I'll be honest, none of them land for me in this movie. They're very odd, they're very overly sexual, they're very awkward and gross. And the word gross is kind of a thing that will ring true for this entire movie, because even the kills, some of the scenes, the cinematography, there's just this weird, gross, grimy tone that goes throughout this entire movie that sits less well with me as I've gotten older. I mean, from the scenes down to like the cockroach kill, to the scene whenever they're in the flashback diner and Freddy stabs the little meatball head in the pizza and then eats it and the slime and the ooze is coming out. Just a weird, gross thing that they chose to do in this movie that is just odd. That's part of the reason why this is one of the most unique and strange installments of this entire franchise. And since I've already brought up one of the deaths, I'll go ahead and talk about the kills in this movie. They're very weak. They're very strange. They're very odd. They're some of my least favorite of the franchise, although they don't have very much competition going forward. The most memorable, like the one I already said, is the cockroach kill where the girl starts turning into a roach and crushes her in a little roach motel. Weird, gross. You got the one, which is probably one of the worst kills and the worst death scenes in any horror movie I've ever seen, which is when Lisa Wilcox's brother, who's the big kung fu guy, is fighting an invisible Freddy. Now, they had a big, more elaborate idea for that, but they ran out of budget. It was going to be like an elevator scene, so they had to kind of do something cheap like that, but God, what a horrible scene.
No eyes.
Come on out and fight me, you chicken shit!
Ninja warriors have called. Find your balance, Rick.
It turns into like this strange little homage to that whole entire side of kung fu cinema. And it's not scary, it's not engaging, it's not exciting. It's just him punching thin air and acting like he's getting hit, and you hear sound effects, and then a flying glove comes at him at the very end. And it's one of the weakest of the franchise. It's definitely the weakest of this movie. And speaking on the kung fu thing, that's also a tone that kind of goes throughout this entire movie, is this weird homage to old kung fu cinema. You see little nods to it here and there. It's not really glaringly in your face, so if that is kind of like a nod that they wanted to do, maybe Rennie Harlan is a big kung fu guy, he does pull that off successfully. It just feels weird in a nightmare movie. And then you have the death in the school with the girl who is kind of like the nerdy one, you know, the wanna suck face kill. And that one's just weird, a really bad CGI effect. This little mechanical arm comes up and hits her face, and then Freddy kisses her and, you know, makes out with her to death. Just very odd. And part of that is, all of those things are all flaws because this movie was not written. It was just kind of being made up as it went along. And Rennie Harlan, to his kind of defense, he didn't really have much other choice but to make these big, extravagant, weird death scenes to make his movie kind of stand out. That's kind of the way that the story was made, is just, all right, how are we going to kill this character? Well, how about we have a robo arm come out? How are we going to kill this character? Well, you know, I don't like bugs, let's turn her into a bug. And that's one of the biggest mistakes you can make when you're making a slasher movie above anything else, is that the death scenes are just kind of thrown out there. They're not really all thought out all that well. They're not really the highlight of what's great about the movie. They're just made up as you go along, and they're just made to be weird and extravagant and visually, aesthetically strange, just for the sake of being visually, aesthetically strange. And a lot of that is kind of a product of the generation that this movie came out in as well, because this was the Freddy, the Nightmare on Elm Street that was made for the MTV generation of fans. It was made to be very bright, very fluorescent, very visually in your face. And, you know, the soundtrack was supposed to be a big part of it. It was meant to be very flashy. And it was because they nailed all of those things that that generation wanted, as well as the hype and the success of the previous movie, that led Dream Master to be the highest grossing of this franchise until Freddy vs. Jason. For many people, this is the movie that kind of made Freddy go from a child molesting murderer to this big pop culture icon, kind of the hero of the movie in a degree.
I am eternal.
It's kind of like the movie centers around Freddy and what Freddy's gonna do and how Freddy's gonna kill and how charismatic and how much swagger Freddy's gonna have. You know, he's got sunshades on in a scene. And all of that was kind of the focus of this, of making Freddy the highlight and the star and the James Bond of this movie, if you will, that it lost the essence of what makes a great slasher, what makes a great horror movie, and what makes a great Nightmare on Elm Street film. Even down to the way that they decide to kill Freddy in this, which is this weird, strange, metaphorical death that, just like the way they resurrect him, is one of the worst ways that they've killed him in this franchise. Basically, he looks at his reflection in a mirror, and him seeing himself and seeing his evil is what starts to kill him. And it's so weird that it just doesn't fit at all. It's odd. I love the practical effects in that scene whenever like the souls of the Elm Street kids start reaching out of his chest and they start grabbing him and doing all that kind of stuff and hold him to the wall, and the one comes out of the back of his head. That is awesome. But the entire concept of his dying because he sees his reflection and sees the reflection of his evil, too metaphorical for Freddy. Sorry. Now, in continuing the tradition that I've been putting forth in all of these Nightmare reviews, it's time to pick my favorite scene of this movie. Now, even though I don't like the concept of this entire existence of this scene because it kills off one of my favorite characters in a way that's not really respectful of that character at all, my favorite scene of this movie is actually the junkyard scene whenever they do kill Kincaid. I love the effect of that junkyard scene. It's very scary as far as isolation. It's just a creepy setting. It kind of calls back to the end of the third movie, and I just like the look of that. The junkyard with all those crushed cars, and even when they zoom out and show that it's a gigantic maze that covers the entire globe. It's just a really cool effect for that scene. And even though, like I said, I don't like the way that they take out Kincaid, if they had done something differently with the way that they take him out and just kept it in that scene, it would have been perfect. But everything surrounding that scene, as far as the effects, the look of it, and the way that scene plays out, that's my favorite scene of the movie. So to wrap all this up, guys, A Nightmare on Elm Street 4: The Dream Master is a really entertaining, goofy, ballsy, strange, off-the-wall, balls-to-the-wall, wild sequel that really stands on its own. It really tries to do something different. I give a lot of credit to Rennie Harlan for what he was able to do given the conditions that he was working under, with there not being any script, not really having a whole lot of people behind him and giving him what he needs to effectively make a great movie. He came out with something that is wildly better than what most people were able to do under those situations. However, the tone, the grossness, the way that they changed Freddy from a horror icon into a comedic icon, the characters that they decide to go with in this, the way that they disrespect some of the characters of Dream Warriors, they're all giant flaws that will never really be forgiven for me, especially given the way that this franchise carried on from the precedent that this movie set, going on into the Dream Child, and especially into Freddy's Dead. There's some unforgiveness there that I'm never going to be able to get over with this movie, but I can still have fun with it. I can still watch it and enjoy it, and I think most of you will enjoy it as well. So if you're a fan of this franchise, if you like to see the comedic Freddy especially, if you just want a movie that's entertaining and strange, and you can put in and just have a good time with, definitely check this one out, but check it out on Netflix. So what do you guys think of A Nightmare on Elm Street 4: The Dream Master? Is this your favorite, your least favorite? Did you grow up with this movie? Do you like the comedic Freddy? Do you like the characters in this, like Lisa Wilcox? Or do you like all of the previous installments way better? What is your thoughts about this movie? Put them all in the comment section below, guys, and we'll talk about it. Please like and share this video and hit that subscribe button, and you can also check down below for all of my social media links where you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and my new Patreon page where I have lots of awesome exclusive content for patron eyes only. So check all that out, guys. Like and subscribe, and if you want to check out some more of my videos, you can check out a few more, including the rest of this Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, by clicking right over here.